So this video is about my honest opinion about this amazing novel, Ulysses. Before you pick up the book, before you make any decision to read it, I invite you to watch this video. Maybe it might be helpful for you. I agree Ulysses is a great novel. It is actually too great. It is too great to be read superficially. You have to be so committed to read it. Let me be more specific. Perhaps you already know the difficulty of reading Ulysses. Ulysses is not any book that you will read in your life. It's very different. What makes this book very difficult is all references Joyce makes to his earlier work. So it's filled with references to his earlier book, The Portrait, and Dubliners. If you haven't read those books yet, do not touch Ulysses. You will not understand anything of the book if you haven't read those books. Also, there are so many references to Odyssey. But it's okay if you haven't read your Odyssey. You can already understand some parts. You can understand the references if you check some online sources. There are also so many references to Odyssey, but you don't need to read Odyssey to understand Ulysses. It's okay if you haven't. You can find some online resources that explain the references to Odyssey. There's so many philosophical references in the book that makes it so hard to understand what's happening in the book. Look, if you have knowledge of philosophy, that's not enough. You will not understand it still. You have to read interpretations of chapters in order to understand what's happening. To me, Ulysses felt like a university course, one that has a lot of prerequisites, and you have to pass those prerequisites in order to enter this one. But some people disagree with me. They say Ulysses is so rich that everyone can read and take some part of it, and that's enough. Before I started reading Ulysses, a friend of mine gave me an advice to check online summaries to understand each chapter. So her advice was that as you're reading each chapter, check the online summary. Now I understand this advice was ridiculous. It is not helpful at all. No matter how much summary you check, you will not understand. You need interpretation, not summary. Also, it undermines the value of Ulysses. Ulysses is not a book appreciated because of its plot. It doesn't matter what happens in the story. If you're just happy to know what happens in the story and in each chapter, don't even bother reading Ulysses. Just check some online summaries. Again, I repeat, Ulysses is not about what happens in this story. It's much more than that. It's much more elaborate. Ulysses is about Joyce's brilliance, about his brilliance which is hidden behind the lines. Literally behind the lines, and you cannot find it there. So you need interpretation. You need a Joycean encyclopedia to decode the text. I'm not exaggerating. Every single chapter of the book needs interpretation and decoding. Without doing this, without doing such hard work, you will not understand what's happening in the book. You will not be able to appreciate the book, the narrative of it. You will not understand why Ulysses is such a masterpiece. So for example, in the chapter named Proteus, nothing happens. It's just a Stephen walking alongside the beach. And there's a whole chapter about his psychological state. It's all about Stephen walking alongside the beach and thinking to himself. Now imagine, Stephen is a philosopher poet. Imagine how confusing, dark, and impossible is his mind to understand. Trust me, reading Ulysses has nothing to do with philosophical knowledge you have, has nothing to do with your literary knowledge. I know philosophy. I have done philosophy in my life, but I could not understand what's happening in this chapter. So there are references to Plato. It's impossible to know he's talking about Plato. So in a chapter like this, it doesn't matter if you understand what's happening. Stephen is walking alongside the beach. It doesn't matter. What makes this chapter amazing is how Joyce writes from the mind of a philosopher poet. It's all a stream of consciousness, but it's really, really difficult to understand it. You cannot understand this chapter without interpretation. You need a scholar to interpret this chapter for you. And this is not the only difficult chapter in the book. There's so many chapters like this. So here I need to make a confession. I never managed to go beyond chapter 7 of the book because I was going crazy trying to decode every chapter. It was really, really time consuming. I was obsessed with Ulysses for a few months. It was all I was doing. I read no other book during that time. It had become like university work, like a task that I had to finish. So, of course, all the hard work took away the pleasure of reading the book. And why should you bother to read a book when you're not enjoying it? I think reading novels should be an enjoyable experience. If it's not an enjoyable experience, why bother? So I totally disagree with Joyce.
Joyce said that if Ulysses isn't worth reading, then life isn't worth living.
To be honest, this is a very arrogant exaggeration. Look, I'm not saying Ulysses is a bad book or you shouldn't read it at all. All I'm saying is that you should be very committed. If you're not committed, if you just want to understand 10% of the book, then don't bother, because you will not appreciate the book for what it is and what Joyce wanted you to see in his book, which is his brilliance. To me, it looked Ulysses was a display of brilliance, a show off, if I may. Look, I like Joyce's other books, like Portrait is an amazing novel. I enjoyed reading it a lot. But Ulysses, it's just impossible. It consumes so much time. And I believe no book, no novel is worth undergoing so much pain and hard work. So to conclude, you should read Ulysses if you're ready to make a commitment to understand it, to decode it, to interpret it. Read Ulysses if it's part of your dissertation. If you need help for decoding and understanding Ulysses better, there is a course on Great Courses that helped me a lot. The name of the course is Joyce's Ulysses by Professor James Heffernan. I listened to his lectures while I was reading Ulysses. It helped me a lot. So perhaps you want to check his lectures. You might find them helpful. I have put the link in the description. So thank you for watching.